With a new Final Fantasy XIV patch, you already know what time it is. You guys have hot takes, and I'm about to react to them. Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail Patch 7.2? Hot takes. I asked for your hottest, your spiciest takes, and you provided. And let's just get right on into this, shall we? Hello, everyone. I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming. And let's start with @net1234, who says, "This is not spicy. I'll be the judge of that, thank you. This is not spicy, but still way too much Wuk Lamat in the MSQ. Now, instead of having her chained to us, we have to spend way more time than we should admiring how great of a job she's doing talking to people in Solution 9, instead of actually sitting on the damn throne and doing her damn job." Now, I didn't like Wuk Lamat either, but I don't actually think she was poorly utilized in 7.2. I actually kind of didn't mind how she was. She's way more tolerable to me when she's not the main character, and especially when the spotlight isn't on her 24/7. The focus of this patch was on largely SPHENE and us, and I think that's a way better balance than they had struck with 7.0 and 7.1. To me, it also kind of makes sense why she is interfering in the affairs of Solution 9 and Alexandria, because, well, 7.0 just had a massive invasion by the people of Alexandria, especially the robots with Zeralja, against Tuliolol, so her as the vow of reason, trying to make sure that doesn't happen again with another new SPHENE. Yeah, like, you may not like the character, but to me, that makes sense. And there's even a couple of moments in 7.2 where I actually kind of liked what they did with Wuk Lamat's character. When we first met Calyx with the Simulant, where she got angry on SPHENE's behalf, and then also at the end when SPHENE says, "Look, I need your help," and Wuk Lamat goes, "That's what I was wanting the endless version of you to say." Nothing overly great or spectacular, just little moments that I kind of appreciated. Especially since they're contained within a story that I care far more about than I did with 7.0 and 7.1. There's always elements to, like, every story that if you want to break them down and really pick apart at it, you can always find something to dislike. And, like, yeah, I know that Final Fantasy XIV didn't exactly build up a lot of goodwill throughout 7.0 and 7.1 for a lot of people, but I think the overall tone and the way that characters were utilized in 7.2, especially characters like Wuk Lamat, just having a not in the spotlight, does a lot of good for the overall writing, especially since the patch was far more focused in its storytelling and its overall presentation. It had a few points that were rather slow-paced, but I think they did decent world-building or possible foreshadowing with those moments. And it's not like Final Fantasy XIV has never had really particularly slow moments either. While I don't think 7.2 is inherently perfect in terms of how it told a story, I think it's a massive step up compared to everything we've had since the conclusion of 6.0. But let's get into that a little bit more with this next hot take. We have @MistMonster, who says, "Arcadian story is better than MSQ. MSQ was better in 7.2, still has a way to go. The thing about the MSQ is that I don't feel anything at all. The closest was the Otis part. I can name multiple parts in other expansions where I felt something, even in Stormblood, which used to be my least favorite MSQ expansion. I've kind of learned relatively recently that I kind of like Stormblood more than I think most people. Son 7.0, while it is still like my least favorite overall .0 story besides like A Realm Reborn and Dawntrail, I still quite like it. But while I do think the Arcadian story was pretty dang good, like the Arcadian is shaping up to be one of my favorite raid series, at least in terms of normal mode, that they've ever put out, I personally preferred 7.2's MSQ over the story of the Arcadian. I just really like what they've done and what they are seemingly going to do with the character of SPHENE. I like Solution 9, though that is part in both of them, I guess. Pretend I made a profound point there, though. I think part of the reason I like 7.2 is because I don't mind build-up, but for a lot of people, their favorite moments in Final Fantasy XIV, and it makes sense why, are the big, like, payoff moments. And we haven't had that really with 7.2, outside of maybe SPHENE, like, asking for the Warrior of Light's help right before the Zelania fight, which is still probably my favorite moment in all of Dawntrail. But 7.2, in terms of, like, what it's setting out to do, it's set up. And it's set up for 7.3, and also laying the groundwork for SPHENE as a character. And my assumption is laying the groundwork for this SPHENE to become like a permanent member of our cast of characters going forward, at least for the foreseeable future. I don't see it just being written off with 7.3 or anything like that. I think she's here for the long term, and I'm becoming more convinced of that every time I watch someone else react to 7.2, and I think more on it. It makes the most sense to me, considering everything they've done with 7.2. But again, like we talked about before, some people just perceive stories differently, and when you come off the back of what is largely perceived to be a fail in terms of story and storytelling with 7.0 and 7.1, people need more than decent setup to have their faith restored. I think if they also are able to nail and knock 7.3 out of the park, we'll see more and more positive sentiment in regards to Final Fantasy XIV, in a very similar way to, say, Stormblood, because a lot of people didn't particularly enjoy 4.0 for a variety of reasons, and I think there are valid reasons to critique 4.0, because it is a flawed experience. I quite like it overall, but there are a lot of issues with it in terms of characterization, pacing, and underutilization of certain locations because of that dual location idea they had for Stormblood. I still really wish we had that one zone that was just the dungeon underwater. I wish that was a full zone because it's so cool. But alas, that could be a video all of its own. I think for a lot of people, yeah, we talk about Shadowbringers and Endwalker when it comes to the creme de la creme of Final Fantasy XIV storytelling. My opinion, some of the best storytelling this game has ever had is in the Stormblood patches. It took like one patch for it to really get going, and then it's just like constantly on fire in my opinion. I liked everything they pretty much set out to do in those patches. When it came to the main story, it was all interesting. The return of Gaius, the lead up to Shadowbringers with all the Scions getting knocked out of commission. I thought that was a really cool plot device they had. Krahatia having like really bad dial-up internet trying to hit us with a Discord call. The whole battle against the Empire, the return of Xenos. Like, for me, there's so many elements to the Stormblood patches, let alone Yotsuyu and Gosetsu and that entire story arc. I think it serves as a great example of just how quickly things can change when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV storytelling. Because one of their strong points, historically speaking, is just how quickly they can get a character to come online and feel as if they've always been there, and that you can't live without them in the story. That's one of their strong points, historically speaking. I mean, hell, one of my favorite villains and one of the best elements of writing this game has ever had, in my opinion, is the character of Medion, who is like the big bad villain that isn't introduced until level 87. It's like, think about how wild that is. Final Fantasy has been historically known to just have a beat-out final villain that's like, I'm God and you have to fight me, right? Like that trope. And they did it again with Endwalker, but they made it so dang good, at least for me. Again, we all experience and react to stories differently, but to me, the character of Medion and that entire story with Ultima Thule hooked me from start to finish. Or even look at the character of Elidibus. I did not care about that jabroni, that white-robed jabroni, until 5.3. Dude was like, whatever, up till then for me. Then 5.3 hit, and they made that masterpiece. And then they brought him back again in Endwalker and made him even better. Think of the Warriors of Darkness back when they were introduced in the patches of Heavensward. Absolute nothing burgers that are just kind of there. Where the entire time I'm like, okay, they're alright, but can we get back to the giant dragon stuff? And then in Shadowbringers, they're like, dude, I would burn a world for these characters. Heck, we might have actually done that. What I'm saying is that, historically speaking, Final Fantasy XIV has done a pretty dang good job of taking something that was once polarizing or controversial in terms of how they were introduced and developed in the story, and then at some random point in the future, they turn it on its head and make it become a beloved pillar of the game. I still think they're capable of doing that, because the way they told the story in 7.2, to me at least, felt like how they've developed stories 6.0 and before. It felt far more focused, the dialogue was way better and more engaging to me. The cinematography was on point, there's no weird-ass filler arc about a cow poo or something that I don't care about. There was no filler arc involving a train, yet. And just the way they were able to convey emotion was far more digestible and enjoyable to me than it had been in 7.0 and 7.1, where they felt the need to tell a lot of things, and when they showed things, it was freaking stupid. But in 7.2, when they showed things, it felt satisfying to me. Watching Sphene mourn Zelenia's tragic fate, looking out at the people of Alexandria, that entire finale, it felt far more in line with what Final Fantasy XIV has historically been for me, and I'm interested to see where they go from here. Now let's get into a little bit of the gameplay, but also a bit of the story, and we have two hot takes here that we're going to address, because they kind of cover the same topic. Speaking of Sphene, we have at Andrew Messa 2548, who says, my take, Sphene shouldn't be a pure caster when she gets her magic back. She should be more along the lines of a sword saint or battle mage. She grew up watching melee duels and wanted to fight with them, so it would make sense that since the two people she looked up to are gone, that she takes some inspiration from their combat style. We also have @BowlerDragon who says, I think it's too early for Sphene hinting at an 8.0 job, but if she is, I hope her style is more based on the racket weapons Garnet and Aiko could use, and that lead into our next physical range job. Otherwise, she's most likely just going to be a scholar-style healer, as in healer pet, as Garnet and Aiko were both white mage/summoners. Alright, so they are clearly hinting at Sphene becoming a trust party member, right? She talked about having to go find her old grimoire. I believe near the end of the MSQ she talks about being a healer or something like that. And one of the big things during, like before and after the Zelania fight and encounter is her lamenting the fact she can't assist us outside of just raid leading. Personally, I think they're hinting at her becoming an Arcanist, and that she'll be an Arcanist instead of simply a Scholar or a Summoner. Maybe not in name, but in terms of function. Just for trust purposes, so she can be either a DPS or a healer. Maybe even a tank if she summons a tank, you know? That could be cool. But like, yeah, she is a big reference to Gon, and I will never call her Dagger. And her big thing in FF9 was summoning, so becoming something that can summon, especially since they hinted at her using a grimoire, makes a lot of sense. Now, however, I don't think Sphene, especially going into the future, should remain simply a reference to Garnet. I think they're doing a good job of blossoming this character into her own thing, and maybe not even with 8.0, maybe down the line with 9.0, but probably 8.0. I don't think it'd be outrageous to see her change her job yet again to one of the new ones. I would love to see a Rune Knight at some point in this game. And going back to what Andrew said, I really like the idea of Sphene keeping the idea of Otis and Zelania alive by eventually becoming some hybrid of what she was and who they were. It's like her own unique way to keep their memory alive instead of endless. I think that could really work. It'd be really cool. The racket weapon idea is interesting, I just don't think they introduce a new range physical job in the next expansion. I think tank and healer, if they don't just cut it back to one new job and have it be either tank or healer, is more likely. But it is kind of interesting how I just don't think we have a range physical job for the Scions. Alize is red mage, Thancred is gunbreaker, Urianger is an astrologer, Y'shtola is a black mage. Actually, a title is different, same thing. I think she can actually heal if you wanted to, because she used to be a white mage pretty much, or conjurer. Graha Tia is whatever. The Catboy can be who the Catboy wants, you know? It is kind of interesting how we just don't have a ranged physical job as a member of the Scions. So it wouldn't surprise me if we eventually got one, but I'm not sure if Garnet herself is the character to do that for. Though if they do end up introducing a new ranged physical job in 8.0, it wouldn't particularly surprise me. I just think tank and healer or one of those is more likely. But if we do end up getting a new DPS, maybe. I guess we also just don't know what Beastmaster is, and are they gonna count that? It's interesting to think about. I think the safest bet for now is that Sphene is going to be an Arcanist/Summoner or Scholar, and you just stick with the FF9 reference for now. Personally, I really like the idea of her eventually getting a sword, and having some hybrid style between Otis and Zelania. Make that a new job, call it Rune Knight or Rune Fencer, and I'm all on board. For the final take of the video, we have William Umbranox 7217, who says, the Viper is the worst design class. Pressing the shiny button is not fun. It is like accessibility taken to an insulting extreme. When I come back, I will be sticking to Ninja and Healer, thank you. Look, it is kind of funny how they talked about Viper being hit the shiny button and then say they want to play Healer, which is you want to press Glare. Look, I kid. Yeah, I have really come off Viper myself. It's something that I can enjoy for little spurts every now and then, but I could never main the thing. There's just not enough going on for it, and while I don't think jobs necessarily need to have a ton going on all the dang time, Viper goes too on the side of being far too simplistic, for my taste personally, though I do like the overall pace it has. It's just, I wish there was a little bit more to it that wasn't just manage this debuff or manage this buff. I think it needs a little bit more mechanically than that. Though I will say, I've been actually really enjoying Black Mage. There are periods where it just does feel like Fire Force Simulator, and yeah, maybe they should kind of rein that in a little bit. And look, I know those changes were rather controversial, I get that. But I've been finding myself having just more fun with the game recently. Particularly with Dark Knight and now Black Mage. And it's weird because, up to this point, those two are kind of my, least enjoyed classes that I actually play because my retainers are them. There are classes and jobs that I enjoy less than Dark Knight and Black Mage. It's just, of the ones that I had played, which in Dawntrail are relatively few, I didn't particularly enjoy them that much, but a couple of little small changes. Haven't completely rectified them, but I like that Dark Mind and Dark Missionary now no longer only mitigate magical damage, and learning how to play Black Mage, albeit it didn't take that long with the 7.2 iteration. It's been rather fun to just absolutely blast things. I'm not someone that thinks across the board job design is irrecoverably bad or anything like that, or that everything just needs wholesale reworks. For quite a few jobs, I think just a few small changes here and there, or a nice little addition here and there, could go a long way. Like Dragoon, though I haven't finished leveling that one up yet. Black Mage does feel like it could use one additional thing to it. I've been begging for new summons for Summoner that's not just Solar frickin' Bahamut ever since its rework with Endwalker. And Dark Knight, while I do kind of enjoy it because I'm a sucker for a big sword, it does need some love, let's admit. I would love to see Abyssal Drain be spammable again. I think Shadowbringer needs to have something to not just feel like filler. Dark Knight needs some love. But I don't think, in the state that it's in, that it's, completely boring or anything. It's just, I think it can be better. And that's my general thoughts on job design across the board right now. I don't think they're war crime inducing terrible or anything like that. It's just with a bit more iteration and a couple new toys here and there, I think a lot of jobs would be perceived to be way more fun and interesting. Or at least they would to me. Viper being one of them because yeah, I also agree. I just think solely hitting the shiny button is not all that good. I just think it needs something, you know? I think Viper's a good example of what I'm talking about here. I like the flow of it. I like the pace of it. It just needs something on top of all of that. And I don't think the answer is just manage this debuff or manage this buff. It needs one other mechanic to really round everything out for me. And I don't know what the form would be for that. It just needs something, you know? And I think with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Leave a comment down below with your own hot take about Final Fantasy XIV 7.2. I want your hottest, I want your spiciest, and I may react to them in a future video. So stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games, leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again!